Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
You gotta be confident about your Achilles when you
Chase
show.
Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I got him.
Chris
Already
Dowhouse,
hearing about me are pointless in fantasy in this sense.
and Adam LaRue. Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate.
That's right. You better be here and better be ready to dominate because we're 8 days, not even away from kickoff on Thursday Night Football between the Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens. Cannot wait. Thanks for joining the show. Operation Domination here. Dan Mater, Adam LaRue, Chase Thornton, Chris Dowhower, the whole crew in the house because we got the perfect draft part 2. If you missed part 1, that was last week, where we did the first 9 rounds, picking from a range of 7 to 9 on the first round and snaking our way through, using our rankings and tiers, nominating and making picks. So you guys got to get an idea of, while you're following us, what you can do leading into your drafts. And if you haven't drafted your home leagues yet, that means you are this weekend. And this is the time to make sure you nail down that draft status. And we're going to get into that today. We also have some breaking news to talk about. Fellas, a lot drops this past week. Cut was absolutely insane. We saw a lot of transactions. So let's go ahead and dive right into that. Cue the breaking news. All right, so to start things off here, because it was a lot. It was a lot. CeeDee Lamb. We'll start with the good. CeeDee Lamb, 4-year contract, $136 million, $38 million guaranteed. I think that was $38 million guaranteed. I think that was the biggest surprise of the whole thing. So what do you guys think about CeeDee Lamb now? He comes in a little bit less than 2 weeks to get ready for the season, but going to have that time, going to be in week 1, unlike, say, a Jamar Chase, unlike, say, a Brandon Ayuk. Does he go back up to being your number 1 on your board, Adam?
No, but it does quell some concerns. And for me, he was starting to get close to a conversation about him and Justin Jefferson for that 2-3 spot. And that conversation has faded from my mind. He is firmly going to be my wide receiver 2 heading into week 1 behind Tyreek Hill for me personally. But no longer, it's firmly him ahead of Justin Jefferson for me.
Yeah, I did move him back into my number 1 spot. So some of the interesting reports coming out, right? He put on 14 pounds, apparently, of muscle. So he's going to be a lot stronger. Obviously, looking to take more hits over the middle of the field, kind of like that. I am still a little bit worried about soft tissue injuries. He talked about some of his training program and what he was working on, due diligence, but it's not the same until you get out there on the field. We all know that. Knowing that this is the one guy who could be in line for 200 targets, and that he did at least get back with at least some time to ramp up, it's hard for me not to have him at my number 1. Tyreek Hill, though, is my number 2 because Jamar Chase pulled a little doozy on all of us, comes back to practice. Zach Taylor opens up his big fat mouth, and Jamar Chase said, hold on. This isn't in the clear yet, buddy boy. Chris, what did you make of that situation?
Yeah, it was kind of odd. I mean, Jamar Chase made it obvious that he was trying to show his face at practice, so it seemed like he was going to come back. There was going to be pushing back this contract talk while he was returning, kind of, play good soldier. And then the news comes out today that backtracking, coach speak, we don't know what Jamar's situation is going to be. It's a day-to-day situation. I think what you're seeing right now is the guy who's trying to maybe get closer to the contract being hashed out, Dan. I mean, it's a good thing. Maybe there was some, news that maybe of the CD contract, now that you have some parameters, what you're working with, maybe Jamar is looking at a contract where he's not going to sign something, he's not going to practice, say, before he signs something. So I actually see maybe as something good versus something negative, but we'll still see what happens.
Yeah, we'll still see what happens. The point is that in that situation, Jamar Chase at least is still in the building. And there was some, at least, expectation that maybe he'll still be willing to play, even if that contract doesn't get done before week 1. We'll see. But right now, I have to put him at the bottom of my elite tier, below St. Brown at 5, just because it's too crazy right now. It's absolutely too. I am not at the point yet where I'm putting him below my next tier, which is like AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson. I haven't quite put him there yet, but if we get into next week and this thing is still like nobody knows the hell's going on, he might have to drift a little bit. But of course, by then, you might have already had your drafts this weekend. So, Chase, just to kind of like tap on that a little bit, are you comfortable with drafting Jamar Chase at the wide receiver 5, or are you going to move him down a little bit lower than that, knowing that you may not know when you go to your draft there?
Well, I had him ranked at 4 anyway. I haven't been getting a ton of him just because of where I had him ranked and where I've been drafted in most of my leagues. Yeah, I mean, today's news wasn't encouraging. I kind of ran a victory lap when Lamb signed because I never did downgrade him. I always had him up there. Jamar Chase, however, there are a lot of guys out there who had him ranked number 1 possibly on their board. He does have to drop. I had him at number 4 anyway. I agree with you. I feel a little bit safer taking, say, Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I'm fine taking Jamar Chase in the second half of round 1 still, because we know what kind of production he can give you. And if we get a full healthy season out of his quarterback, I think the sky's the limit for Jamar Chase. I'm still comfortable taking him in the second half of round 1, but he's no longer a top 5, top 6 type overall pick for me until and unless he can get his butt in some pads at practice instead of street clothes.
Yeah, and just continuing on here. So we might as well talk about Brandon Ayuk of it all. I mean, you can't get away from talking about these receivers. I'll talk about Brandon Ayuk. So, like, John Lynch made this a story today. Not that it already wasn't, but, he just made an extra story today. We expect Brandon Ayuk to be out there in practice today. That was the expectation all the time if he was on the team at this point. And then Brandon Ayuk doesn't show up to practice, and it seems like we're back here at square one, and there's some frustration now, visibly in the public coming from the San Francisco front office. The point is this: he's kind of the same boat as Jamar Chase. Nobody knows what's going on. He's still not at practice today. We're getting very, very close to the beginning of the season. Now, unlike those other guys, though, because we know they can be elite wide receiver 1s, Brandon Ayuk doesn't have that kind of target distribution. And for me, and you guys can tell me if I'm crazy or not, but Brandon Ayuk's now my wide receiver 25. I don't even have him inside my top 24 anymore at this point. Not only staying as efficient as he was last season, going to be a tall task anyway, with expected some regression, you're still dealing with the problems of everybody's got to eat. Devo's got to eat. Chris McCaffrey's got to eat. George Kittle's got to eat. And now you haven't had ramp-up time. And now I don't even know when that's going to be, because we still seem like we're at a huge impasse, maybe even more so than, say, the Chase and Cincinnati situation. So am I crazy, guys? I don't care who answers.
No, I haven't moved him down yet, only because I haven't finalized my last set of rankings. I'm going to be working on that, getting them out before the weekend comes. But when they do come, yeah, he's going to have to drop for me. I already had his projections were a little bit lower than I think some had, but based on kind of the aggregate of how I put my rankings together, I still had him at 19 overall. He'll be dropping for me, yeah, just because we know he's not necessarily the alpha dog in that offense. There's at least 2 more dogs in front of him, if not 3 on any given day. But also, like you just said, he's got to have at least some kind of ramp up time. If Chase gets in the building tomorrow, he's at least got a week. Ayuk doesn't look like he's anywhere near the point where he's going to be stepping on the practice field. So yeah, I am starting to worry about Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah. Yep. As a 49er fan, I am too. Trust me. Okay. So we get done with the receiver news. Russell Wilson gets named the starter. Pittsburgh showing yet again they're stupid and stuck in being tradition and loyal despite their nose. And Arthur Smith, we'll continue to do Arthur Smith things. I don't think we have too much more we really have to add to that. Some other ones I'm going to run through real quick, and then I want to get to a little bit of Kyron Williams talk. TJ Hawkinson starting on the pup. That's something we expected to begin with. Nick Chubb starting on the pup, also expected. This one, a little bit of a surprise. It shouldn't be too surprising, but Jonathan Brooks starting on the pup, that was kind of a 50-50 coin toss there. So Chuba Hubbard will get the start at the beginning of the season. But we talked about this before. When it comes to Brooks, you were drafting him for the second half of the year anyway. Marshawn Lloyd. So we can talk a little bit about this too. So this is real curious with the Green Bay backfield. A.J. Dillon goes on season-ending IR. He was out of there. Now, Marshawn Lloyd, we thought there was actually even reports that he was going on the pup, maybe even the IR. Turns out he's going to avoid both. but he's barely practiced throughout training camp. He still is not 100% as I understand it right now anyway, even if he is able to get some practice time in before week 1. So I'll go to the Packers fan on this one. Josh Jacobs just moved up into my RB10 because the only thing I was worried about before is him not getting enough volume to sustain being an RB1 because of what Matt LaFleur's history was in the past. Well, I don't see where the option is going to be taking away from touches from Josh Jacobs right now, at least at the beginning of the year.
No, all the news that we had heard, actually, we had heard, reports that Dillon was looking good and better than they had expected when he was playing still before the injury. We were hearing kind of the opposite about Marshawn Lloyd, that he wasn't necessarily impressing all that much. And then here out of nowhere, we get this bolt out of the blue, and Dillon is gone and Lloyd is not gone, but yet he's not really there either. They must be comfortable enough with what they saw out of Emmanuel Wilson last year to think that they can get through with him. And like you said, running Jacobs into the ground, apparently, unless they can get Marshawn Lloyd back. So, with the volume, I think we were all hoping that Jacobs would get that kind of volume, because in the past, when he's gotten that kind of volume, he has been a top tier fantasy running back. If he gets that now, which it looks like he's going to have to for at least the first month or so, the sky could be the limit for him. I definitely will be, like you said, moving him up in my rankings when I release him this weekend.
Chris, I want to go to you on this one because you've been a Donta Foreman guy. You've been the one on this show who's talking about he's going to have the red zone touches. Now, he gets cut. Now, that does not mean that he's not going to get signed after they do their roster bit and get back on the 53-man active roster. That is possible. But there's also been reports about Pierre Strong has been actively running as the RB2. Now, some of that could be because Foreman got hurt earlier on in training camp. But I wanted to get your take on it. Are you worried at all that the Browns are not going to bring back Donta Foreman? If that were to be the case, what would that do for Jerome Ford in your mind? Or do you think Donta Foreman's going to sign? He's going to go back into the role that you were expecting the entire time?
No, I think it's going to be Jerome Ford's job. I think Donta Foreman's going to be the guy that they can rotate if need be. But I think Jerome Ford showed you last year that he's going to continue to be that kind of Nick Chubb role, and then you're going to have Pierre Strong be that Kareem Hunt role. So I think you see the kind of the establishment of the roles already kind of dictated. They've only got to go through a couple of weeks. I think you're still going to see maybe other guys be rotated in that backfield at smaller points. But right now, to start off the season, I think right now just makes Jerome Ford very secure, and Donta Foreman is somebody who might get a chance down the road.
Jerome Ford is my RB 28 now. I have him one spot behind Zamir White. It was actually one of the biggest jumps as far as like that tier goes. Because look, this time of the year, we've done our projections throughout the summer. We're not making big jumps with our top 36 guys at running back, top 36. He jumped from 35 to 28 for me because I'm like, look, you're going to be the guy. And even when Nick Chubb comes back, Chris, I think you'd agree with this. I don't think Jerome Ford goes away.
No, I definitely agree. I think this backfield showing you that traditionally for the last couple of years now, they've tried to rotate two guys if possible, and necessarily pitching the whole roles. There's different guys utilized in the past situation, even in the red zone. We saw Kareem Hunt not catch the ball, but actually be really effective in the red zone last year and score touchdowns. So I think there's still going to be a role there for Jerome Ford down the road, and I think you're ranking moving him up.
All right, so one more piece of news, and then we'll end the breaking news segment with Kyren Williams. I know the breaking news segment is going a little bit long, guys, but there was a lot to talk about, and we have to. And if it wasn't for the rest of our show, we could probably turn the whole show into the breaking news that's happened in the last week. But Adam, I want to get your reaction. Dalvin Cook to Dallas.
I mean,
sorry.
Look, I don't think it's the craziest thing in the world. I think it's one of those. There's been a few running backs in recent memory that have just bumped practice squad to practice squad, and we're like, oh wow, it's a headline that such and such is joining the backfield. I'll believe it when I see it. I'm not going to be shocked if he makes the active roster for the same reasons that Zeke is there. He's a veteran running back. He's going to go to the right hole. He's going to make the right read. He's going to pass protect competently, and that might just be enough in this backfield, to be honest with you. But it's not like an important signing. I don't think it really changes things much for Zeke. It's definitely, if you were someone that in zero RB builds was buying in on Dowdle, this is definitely concerning to you. But if you were on Zeke or otherwise were interested in this offense, I don't think it changes anything.
I mean, like, you want to get out the walkers and the crutches and just get the entire backfield, because that's exactly what Dallas is going to be pretty much at this point.
They got to sell jerseys so that they can afford the CJ contract. It makes sense.
No, yeah, like you said, Dalvin Cook taking over in a long, proud tradition of guys like Melvin Gordon and Latavius Murray. Yeah, jumping practice squad to practice squad
there on the Chiefs.
Yep. Yeah. No, I would like this signing better if they hadn't already made it when they brought Zeke back, but.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Adam, right back to you real quick. Were you taking Zeke or Rico as a flyer before? And if you were, are you not now because of this?
I have both of them in spots as a flyer, just if they happen to fall. I'm probably going to do the same with Zeke, and I'm maybe a little more cautious with Dowdle. Maybe in Dynasty, I might throw a flyer because he is pretty cheap, especially after the news. But neither of them were people who at cost I was necessarily trying to get, but if they fell, definitely willing to. And Zeke, my opinion hasn't really changed. If anything, I think they're a little lower on Dowdle than the public might have been, and therefore Zeke might get a little bit more than expected. So he might be a little interesting. I don't think that there's anything that Dalvin Cook showed me on the field last year that he does any better than anything Zeke does.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Hey, Dominic, thanks for joining the show. Garrett Wilson or Justin Jefferson at pick 8 in a 10-team league PPR. I think I can safely speak for the entire panel. Justin Jefferson's the best receiver in the league. Yes, Justin Jefferson, even with Sam Darnold, is still the pick. I'm pretty sure we all have it ranked the same way. All right, so this is where I wanted to end the breaking news segment with Kyren Williams talk. I have a bone to pick with almost the entire fantasy industry right now on this, losing their minds because Sean McVay said he's going to return punts. This is what I'm not understanding. Sean McVay didn't say he's going to return punts and now is a special teams player and therefore in a 50-50 committee with Blake Corum. That's not what he said. In fact, I have the quote right here. Kyren Williams is going to be our punt returner. It's another opportunity to get him touches and impact the game. You feel comfortable with that because of the confidence in Blake Corum and Ronnie Rivers being able to spell him if need be. Key points there. He's not talking about taking away touches from Kyren Williams as a running back and giving to him as a punt returner. He's talking about giving Kyren Williams more touches in more ways on the field. And I'm literally listening to people lose their minds. And Kyren Williams is like, he's got to be RB15 now or RB20. Or I'm like, what are you talking about? Because he's going to return the points?
Personally.
Thank you, Adam.
That was a vote of confidence to me. I don't know where everyone got that. I agree.
It's a vote of confidence, but I think people are worried that because he's returning punts, he's opening himself up to more injury, as if they don't open themselves up to injury every time they take a snap. But we've seen in the past Sean McVay be real weird and fickle with how he uses his running backs. We've seen guys fall out of favor after short stretches of, ineffectiveness or injury or whatever else. And I think people are worried that with Kyren Williams not having all of the capital behind him that some of these other guys have, that if and when he gets hurt, Corum steps in, looks good. All of a sudden, now we're out Kyren Williams, who we were taking in the first or second round. Now that guy's a complete bust, and Blake Corum takes the lead. I agree with you. I think people are overblowing it, but I see where the concern is. It's not necessarily great news if you're one of his fantasy owners, but I do agree that it seems like a vote of confidence from his coaching staff that he's valuable to that team for the time being.
Here's the thing. If that was the narrative, that you're worried about him getting more hurt on special teams, I can understand it a little bit. That's
not what people are saying. That's not what people are saying. You're right.
That hasn't been the narrative. You're returning punts. Now all of a sudden this is a committee. That's the narrative, which is ridiculous. And it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
With Ronnie Rivers too.
I had to, with Ronnie Rivers. Thank you.
Just to be clear, very briefly on one piece of context, the Rams as a team last year received 28 punts. That's what we're talking about. For the record, just so
we're talking about him getting less than two more touches a game.
28 touches throughout the
less
entire
than two
season.
touches a game.
This is a defense without Aaron Donald, by the way.
Right. So see how that number is going to move.
Yeah, I just had to get that off my chest because it's the most ridiculous thing I've heard in the last couple of days is the fantasy injury just losing their minds over that piece of content. But let's get a little quick spot in here, and then we'll get into our actual perfect draft part 2 of We Are Here, We Are Here. FantasySportsAdvice.com, offering the best fantasy sports social media platform. Why join endless Discord communities or the trolls of Reddit? Fantasy Sports Advice is a community designed to help you win with 24/7 support. Go to FantasySportsAdvice.com and become a pro member for unlimited access. Again, go to FantasySportsAdvice.com today. All right. So, yeah, shout out to FantasySportsAdvice.com. We'll make sure you follow us on our YouTube channel at FFAN Advice Network. All right. So, let's get into it, guys. It's time for our 10th round. Now, just a recap real quickly of our current roster so everybody remembers. Again, go back and check out last week's show if you did not see it. We went through the first 9 rounds. But our current roster is Justin Jefferson, Travis Etienne, Cooper Kupp, Devonta Smith, T. Higgins, Kyle Pitts, Tony Pollard, Christian Watson, and Jaden Daniels. That is so far our roster here. So in the 10th round, this is what we got going on. One person, of course, is going to select between the nominees, and 2 people will be nominating. So, Adam, you and I will going to be nominating this round. You go first with your nominee.
Yeah, great team so far. First of all, this would be sick to leave any draft with. So, definitely excited there. My first nomination is going to be a guy who, I'm excited about. Going into the season, I actually someone just reached out to me on one of my sleeper teams and I haven't replied to him yet, but he's trying to get this player from me, and at cost my answer is going to be no. I just haven't decided how I'm going to break that news to him, but that player would be Chase Brown for the Cincinnati Bengals, who I think is one of the best gambles that one can make at this point in the draft. Look, there's certainly a chance that this is Zach Moss the whole way. I'm not going to discount that as a possibility. But at the same rate, there's a very well chance that in a very good offense, Chase Brown, who is an explosive running back, could run away with this thing. I think that's within the realm of possibility, whichever way you personally lean, think is the highest percent chance. It's within the realm of possibility, and that would be fantastic for fantasy. So if you're, especially if you do feel a little bit weak at the running back position, which I know we draft a little bit light so far in this draft, hey, this is like one of the slam dunk dart throws that you can do late in the draft to give yourself a real opportunity to have someone who could absolutely find themselves in the RB2 conversation the back half of this season. I mean, I don't think that's dramatically unrealistic. And to get that value here, someone who could do it, I feel really happy about it.
Yeah, Adam, just to be upfront here, I love the pick. The reason why Chase Brown's not my nominee here, not my tier players here, is because I would have already taken him. Because I haven't. I was just going to talk about somebody else, and I'm going to pretty much just tell Chris, hey, go ahead and take Chase Brown. My nominee is going to be another running back. It's going to be Trey Benson here. And I've talked about this probably ad nauseum on the show, but if it's the first time tuning in, I'm going to break it down to you guys one more time. James Conner has never played an entire season, period. It is a given he is going to miss a handful of games. What makes this different from other years when James Conner would then reassume his RB1 role after he comes back from this injury is Trey Benson mixed with James Conner being on the last year of his deal at his age, likely not coming back to the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals likely not a playoff team, and I could very well see if Conner misses a few games, Benson comes in and plays well, that they may ride out the rookie and see what they have in the future for next year. Because Benson is the only running back I can think of in the tenure of James Conner at Arizona who actually has the skill set of a 3-down running back. 4.39 40, can get done in the passing game, needs some work in pass protection. But again, we're drafting him for the second half of the season, not for early on when he would likely get a little bit more, trust within that coaching staff from that angle. So Trey Benson, Blake Corum, these are guys I'm looking to target kind of in these rounds. Chris, you pick out between the two nominees.
Yeah, so I like the fact that we're going running back. There's definitely some depth. I think, we want to look at some of the extra guys. You guys keep two good, selections here. I'm going to go with Adam with the Chase Brown. I agree at the end, he's probably somebody will be off the board a little bit earlier, hopefully. But if not, I like him definitely over Benson. One of the things about Benson's pass protection, this is a guy that coaching staff does not trust at all in third down. Has not played one third down snap this entire preseason. They're already talked about, he's going to Demo Cardo is going to be the third down back more than likely. The guy that they'll rotate in there, even if there's injury to Connor. So I think Benson's guy who's ever been a bell cow back in college. I love the pro set, I love the skill set, but I think this is a guy a little too rich for my blood when there's Chase Brown sitting there. So I go with Chase Brown.
Can't argue. Again, led off with, take Chase Brown, and Chase Brown's there. So we got a Chase Brown to our roster here. And we have another question coming in from Dominic. If I go Justin Jefferson in the first at pick 203, do I go with another receiver and risk having a weak running back? One, my receiver options at the pick would be A.J. Brown or Harrison Jr. or go with Kyron. So to me, this is a question. Do you go Kyron Williams? Do you go A.J. Brown, guys? And for me, it is A.J. Brown. Even if I have Justin Jefferson in round one, I do have A.J. Brown a little bit ahead of Kyron in my overall rankings. But what say you?
You're scared off by the punt return thing, aren't you?
Yeah, totally. It has nothing to do with A.J. Brown being a superstar in his own right. But yeah.
Are you comfortable with a 0 RB or close to it, maybe a hero RB build? Because if you want a top tier running back, you are going to have to hope that one's there for you then here at the end of round 3. If you go with A.J. Brown, if you're comfortable with that, by all means do it, because you're going to be strong at wide receiver. If you're not comfortable enough, or if you don't think that you have the drafting skill set to build like that, to build your roster like that, then take the running back. You've come out of your first 2 picks with high guys, and now you can have a little bit more freedom in how you build your roster going forward. It's what you're comfortable with and your skill set when you're drafting. But for me, yeah, I'm probably going A.J. Brown there, just because I'm not a giant Kyron Williams guy anyway. But
Chris, what are you going to say?
Yeah, I'm going to go with A.J. Brown. I like Kyron Williams as the value, and that's a tough choice. It's not just skipping the running back position is a little, ballsy in this sense. But I like the A.J. Brown because you're looking at a guy that we can't argue couldn't be a top 3 receiver, and you can rank him up there just as much as anybody else has been. The guy who's going to be in Kellen Moore offense. We saw Keenan Allen have a ridiculous year. Well, A.J. Brown was good. Imagine what he could do in that Keenan Allen role, moving him all around the field. So I like A.J. Brown's upside. I like Kyron Williams a lot, but we talked about different things that could happen throughout the season to him. A.J. Brown's a stud. Where you have Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown. Now I'm ready to come get some with anybody.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, so let's go into now our 11th round pick after we made the Chase Brown selection in the 10th round. So the back end of the 11th round, Adam's going to pick between the 2 nominees that are going to be nominated by Chase and Chris in this one. So Chase, go ahead.
All right. Well, we've been pretty set at wide receiver here. My tier players here, I'm looking at guys like Dobbins, Charbonnet, Aaron Rodgers, Chase Brown was in this tier for me, Taysom Hill. But we've got our starting quarterback. We got our tight end. So I'm still looking running back here, because I think we need to build that out a little bit. We just missed out on the last of this kind of the starting running back. So now we're getting into more of the handcuffs or the backups with upside. So I'm going to nominate J.K. Dobbins here. And I know that we've all been burned by him before, but, and he's coming off an injury. But this situation in LA, I think, could be perfect for kind of a career reset for him. He has averaged 5.8 yards per carry for his career. That is crazy. Now, he's only played probably an equivalent of about 2 years in his career. But when he touches the ball, he has the skill to get it done. He's familiar with Greg Roman's system. He's played in that before. He can catch the ball if and when they decide to throw it to the running back there. Gus Edwards, the bus has injury history too. This is not a settled backfield situation here. We're going into the year knowing that Gus Edwards is the nominal number 1, but there's still Kamani Vidal. There's still J.K. Dobbins. I'm willing to bet on Dobbins there with Vidal being unproven. So J.K. Dobbins is going to be my nominee here.
Okay. 2 Achilles and ACL. Yeah, Chase says no problem.
I can't quit him. I can't quit you.
Chris, what do you got?
Look, I like the J.K. Dobbins. That was the guy that I definitely would consider, and I'm not going to argue strongly against, because I think the upside's there. Whether or not he gets injured is that something we're debate. But the guy's still healthy. Has made it through the whole offseason so far. He's actually going to be playing. So right now, as of now, he's going to be a Greg Roman offense as a guy that's one of the feature running backs. I love the upside. But I'm looking for some kind of stability and making sure that we're locking down our quarterback position. I'm going to go Trevor Lawrence in the situation. Trevor Lawrence's ADP is 100, I think 120 right now. So a guy that I look at as has upside, a guy who finished QB7 from week 11 on last year. So a guy that you can see can continue to have some growth in his offense. A guy who has had 4 rushing touchdowns last year, 5 the previous year. So a guy who uses his legs, he's going to get you 300 to 400 yards rushing. So isn't a guy who's limited to throwing the ball as well. So there's still a lot upside for Trevor Lawrence, and I want to make sure that I have security for Jaden Daniels, Dan. I'm looking at Adam. I'm looking at the guy, the quarterback situation where I let Jaden Daniels running, but if he gets hurt, I'm screwed. I want to make sure I have a good option. So I'm looking at Trevor Lawrence as my guy I want to throw out there.
Yeah, he did have a tendency to get mollywopped in LSU when he was running around the field. All right, Adam, so you got 2 tough choices, Dobbins or Trevor Lawrence. Which one are you going to take?
For me, I just want to keep going yard at running back. To me, that's what I would do. I think there's still very solid quarterback options. I even think this season is a weird one in which, look, I don't want to leave a draft with someone like Jaden as my only quarterback, but I do think you could get away with it this year just by the depth. There's a lot of options that I do think have realistic upside. I would want to secure someone sooner than later, but if I left the draft night, I wouldn't be like completely torn apart about it. Some options, coming up here shortly. So I'm willing to take that chance. And J.K. Dobbins is absolutely someone who, look, I think he's going to start out. He's going to be, the 1A guy in a backfield that is going to, they're going to try to establish the run. This is going to be an important part of their identity. He's going to get the first crack at it. I think that's a really solid gamble. We've seen some really big plays from J.K. Dobbins in the past, and I'm willing to take the swing.
I will say, Chris, to your point here about Trevor Lawrence and Jaden Daniels, I have Jaden Daniels coming into this weekend. I had Jaden Daniels ranked 12 and Trevor Lawrence ranked 13. Trevor was already long gone on my board by then, so I don't disagree with your selection at all because I think he's got potential to be great this season.
Yeah, not a bad pick at all. That high upside at quarterback. Agreed.
I think we need a flag on the field because I feel like Adam just torpedoed my next nominee for the next round. But we'll get into that in just a second here. We got the 12th round now, early 12th round. And this is why Adam, actually, I'll let Adam talk because now you'll know once Adam talks about his nominee, you'll know why he torpedoed me in the earlier round. But in this one, it will be Chase making the pick between the 2 nominees. Go ahead, Adam. Tell everybody why you picked Dobbins in the last round, the real truth.
Well, my nomination here is, in fact, Atlanta Falcons quarterback Kirk Cousins. I look
convenient.
It is convenient. Look, I think there are originally, just for transparency with the audience, originally I had Aaron Rodgers at this spot, and I'd be happy with that too. I'm perfectly content with that as well. And that is my point, is that, in this round, even in the next one, guys like Kirk Cousins, Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, I would be very happy with as my backup to Jaden Daniels. Of that group, Kirk Cousins is the one who was lights out last season prior to his injury. It is a very serious injury, but for a guy like Kirk Cousins, probably less so on the scale of like, all right, if someone's going to have an ACL tear, probably Kirk Cousins is the type of quarterback who can withstand that the most. And look, he's surrounded by some really great weapons in Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson. This is an offense that I think on the whole has a lot of promise. So I'm really excited about this Atlanta Falcons team. I've always been, at least, for a good handful of years now, been a Kirk Cousins believer. And I think he's going to be a really good value in fantasy drafts this season.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. I'm just being pissy because my nominee at this point. So first of all, let me just paint a little picture here. We're in round 12 right now, right? So we have, once we get to 15 and 16, that's when we're looking to go defensive kicker. So basically, we have 3 rounds to take shots on players who are in position for upside.
Yes,
and that's what I'm looking for in this nominee, which is Ray Davis, my guy, man. Ray Davis is a very good running back, period. Selected in the 4th round of the NFL draft. should be the number 2. See no reason why he's not going to beat out Ty Johnson for final depth chart here when we get into week 1. He's a touchdown maker. He had 14 touchdowns this final year of his collegiate year. You know what James Cook doesn't do? Scored a damn ball inside the 5-yard line.
Yep.
Like they were trotting out Latavius Murray and any old man that could get off the street just to fall forward because they didn't want James Cook taking on those touches. He's 5'8", 211. He's proven in college that he has a 3-down skill set. Yes, he's 25. I don't care. We're talking about redraft for this year. James Cook's had fumbling issues on top of it, on top of being undersized and being a risk injury. There's a real chance that by second half of the year, we're seeing Ray Davis take over this backfield, whether it's due to injury or just because he's more trustworthy in golden situations, or at the very least, a rotational positional flex guy because he's going to have touchdown upside because I do believe he'll get the goal line role. So Ray Davis is somebody I think he has the upside to be top 20 running back, potentially, if he were to take over James Cook, but also because of his role, be top 36 and way outperform his ADP. So Ray Davis is my nominee here. Chase, go ahead and make your pick.
You sound so resigned, Dan. No, listen, I like Ray Davis too. Again, love the story of the man. He's overcome a lot. He is a good player. I like him. In fact, I think I know I've taken him in at least 1, maybe 2 rookie drafts today, literally today, even in Dynasty. I like Ray Davis, but knowing what we've got coming up here going forward, and knowing that Ray Davis, if I could get Ray Davis as my running back 5 on my roster, I would love it all day. But we do need a second quarterback. And by the time we need that second quarterback, in theory, with Jaden Daniels having a week 14 bye, I think Cousins can be up to speed and ready to go. He's also a nice shot to take because we do think that this offense can have some upside this year. I will go with Cousins, but I will say you make a compelling case for my guy, Ray Davis. I love Ray Davis, and if I could get him as my running back 5, I would jump on that in most situations.
Can I just say real quick that Adams' guys were Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins as the secure guys replacement for Jaden Daniels' injury. That's just where I'm a little hesitant.
It is a little weird. It is a little weird.
Just 2 guys that I'm not necessarily confident in that are going to be available for me. But go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, a couple of AARP members coming off Achilles injuries.
I was thinking, Adam, want a rebuttal to that?
I don't think that I have ever said anything other than I will take shots late in drafts. I will kind of gamble with things like that, and
he will torpedo my nominee in return.
You want to see Kirk wearing that chain on the plane with 2 healthy Achilles. That a boy.
Oh man. All right. So we got the 13th round now. Back in the 13th round, still picking out some sleepers here in this area. I'm going to pick between the nominees this time. Chris and Chase are going to nominate who they want me to pick from. So Chris, let's go to you first.
Yes, I'm going back to the running back position, a guy that I might be off the board, but a guy that we have in our ADP range, and that's Jalen Wright from Miami Dolphins. Look, I'm trying to get my hands in that backfield. It's a backfield that last year had 27 touchdown rushes, had 6 more in the passing game, 7 more in the passing game. So, I mean, you have 33 touchdowns available for you to get your hands on, had 2,300 yards rushing. So Jalen Wright's a guy who can mix in with A-Chain, who never played more than 60% of the snaps when he was healthy. I only played 11 games last year. Raheem Mostert, who's A32, a guy who's been historically has injury issues. And Jalen Wright isn't a guy who necessarily has to have lots of touches because we've seen him in Tennessee. He's a rotational back, a guy who just needs a handful of touches to be productive. And we know in Miami you can do that. So a guy who's electric in a running game, and a guy that I think long-term could be upside swing for us, adding some depth in our backfield.
Okay. All right. Like that. Jalen Wright, very, very popular sleeper pick right now. And we do, like you pointed out, we do know this is a backfield with 2 injury-prone, potentially running backs. He may get some playing time at some point during the season as a result. So, Chase, why don't you go ahead and tell me who you want me to draft?
No, that's a nice nominee. That's a nice nominee. But I'm going to go with the wide receiver position here because we have left it alone here for a couple of rounds now. I'm looking at, in this tier of guys, typically you're seeing Jalen Wright, but you're also seeing guys like Dan's favorite Baker Mayfield. You're seeing Antonio Gibson, Josh Downs, the aforementioned Marshawn Lloyd, who we know won't play for a little while. But I'm going with a guy who also matches up in my tier here, and Josh Palmer from the Los Angeles Chargers there. Listen, of the wide receivers who are left on the board at this point in your drafts, Josh Palmer is the one who has the clearest path to being his team's overall wide receiver one. Now, in a Greg Roman offense, that may not necessarily translate to wide receiver one numbers. Like, he's not going to be top 12 in the league, but he's got the clearest path of the guys left here to be his own team's wide receiver one. I like that. It's still Herbert at quarterback, so he's still got a talented quarterback throwing to him. He's got a career 66% catch rate. He averaged 9.5 yards per target last season. He could return you low wide receiver 2 numbers with 80 plus catches, 1,000 plus yards, and 5 or 6 touchdowns easily. We've seen him do that, have that kind of output a couple years ago when he was in the starting lineup a lot more with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams missing time. So I'm going to nominate Josh Palmer here to be our wide receiver 6 as the wide receiver 1 on his team.
I just want to take a second and say, we got pretty good value here to choose from. We're talking about the 14th round here, guy, or the 13th, right? Yeah, 13th, 14th round here. If I could actually get my microphone to, hang with me here for a second. There we go. So we go either direction at this point. We've taken plenty of shots at running back. We, of course, started off strong at wide receiver to begin with. So for me, I'm still coming down to who do I think has the most upside and the clearest pathway to get to that upside. As much as I love Ladd McConkey, there is a world where, whether it's due to injury or being a rookie within Greg Roman's offense, that he's not quite ready to take over that number 1 target spot. Only that number 1 target spot, I think, is going to have fantasy relevancy when it comes to that offense. Palmer still could be that guy. Now, with Wright, yes, Mostert could get hurt. Not something we haven't seen before. All right. Devon Achane could get hurt. That's something we have definitely seen before. Okay. And there's a clear pathway there where that could happen. But Palmer, I think, has the clearer pathway in this instance. So I am going to go with Josh Palmer here over the 3rd string running back at the time as of right now. So that's the direction I'm going to head in for that one. But I liked both the nominees. It was a tough decision between the two. But now we can get into the 14th round, which is really kind of the last round we get to actually choose, players before we actually have to consider defenses and kickers, or have to draft defenses and kickers. Chase is going to pick between the two nominees in this one. Adam and Chris are going to give up the nominees, and it's going to be a doozy. I'm waiting to see this one. So Adam, go ahead.
Oh, you're going to love these two. I just thought.
Woo, Nelly.
So my nomination, as I previously mentioned, I will gamble with my late round picks, and this is one of those without any shadow of a doubt. That would be a New York Jets wide receiver Mike Williams. Come on board. Look, this is a body type that Aaron Rodgers has had a lot of success with in the past. He's liked some big receivers, and specifically as far as skill set goes, he likes guys who can create some space at the catch point down the field. With some physicality, get some stuff over the shoulder on the outside of the field. I actually think that, look, if they're able to get Mike Williams back to the level that he was at the beginning of last season, which, look, it's a guy who has come back from a lot of injuries. Certainly, there is an opportunity for Aaron Rodgers to not come back to what he was. There's an opportunity for Mike Williams to not come back for what he was. But that's why we're talking about picking him in the very last round. We're talking about picking skill position players. And I think at that point, I'm willing to make the gamble that he is the player that he was, and that Aaron Rodgers is the player that he was, at least the last time we saw him with the Packers, which wasn't great, but we saw what that was able to do with Christian Watson, who, while much faster, is a guy with that aforementioned body type going on the outside down the field, a guy who is impactful in the red zone. Obviously, we all have Garrett Wilson as a wide receiver 1, so I recognize that Garrett Wilson is going to dominate the targets here. But he is still a young receiver. He is still someone who has not had some dominant, massive season before. And while we're used to Aaron Rodgers in recent years kind of pinpointing that wide receiver 1 and just going back and back and back to that guy, that's because Devontae Adams never had real competition until we got to that last year or two. I mean, early in his career, he had 2 and at some points even 3 wide receivers that were realistically involved in the offense. And while that's been a long time, and I'm not denying that this is ages ago, Yep. In quarterback terms, I don't think it's unrealistic for a quarterback at his age to completely flip the script. That's what Tom Brady did at 40, going into a Bruce Arians offense. And comparing anyone to Tom Brady is insane, but Aaron Rodgers isn't just anybody.
Except for Brock Purdy.
I'm willing to at least at this point in the draft consider a gamble like this. He isn't someone who, look, I think he just started practicing in full this week. So the first month of the season, I'm expecting very little. But again, at this point in the draft, I'm looking for someone who can step in on buys, or if one of my guys get hurt, has upside later in the season, or, and I think this is impactful in Mike Williams' case, be a big-time player come playoff time, which I don't think is that crazy because this could be a Jets team that is really fighting for their lives down the stretch of the season. If things go to plan, they're probably throwing punches for a wild card spot at the end. That's probably what they're looking at. So, again, I like the gamble personally.
All right. That's a gamble. That's a gamble. Chris might have a better gamble or bigger gamble, I should say. What do you got?
First, I'm going to say, Adam, I don't know how big of a gamble it may. Adam makes a lot of great points. Alan Lazard had 10 touchdowns. His reason he got paid to be on the Jets in the first place. So this isn't – Mike Williams is definitely more talented than Alan Lazard. That we can all vouch for that. We also remember James Jones hung around forever. And for why? Because James Jones could be a good guy in the red zone and get open when he needed to. Mike Williams has a lot of things that you're right, Aaron Rodgers look to. But I'm going to go with a different guy. Dan, I don't really want to have 25 receivers to pick from. I think we already have plenty of choices. So I want to make sure I have depth. I want to make sure that I want to lock down. So I know Kyle Pitts is our guy that we love. I want to make sure that Kyle Pitts is somebody that I can make sure I can trust. So I'm going with Taysom Hill. The guy might be off the board for a lot of people, but a tight end has a lot of upside. A tight end who finished top 10 7 times last year. A guy who finished top 5 5 of those times as well. So this guy has upside. Just to give you some context, people that love Dalton Kincaid, love Trey McBride, well, those guys also finished, 6 and 7 times in the top 10. So they're not guys necessarily who are going rounds and rounds earlier than Taysom Hill, but a guy who's giving you pretty much close to the same kind of upside. And also a guy that, when we look at the ways that you can get production out of this guy, is not always dependent on the PPR. It can be falling into the red zone. It can be throwing the ball. It can be so many different ways to Taysom Hill to be a guy that can be a game changer. Pairing up with Kyle Pitts gives us a depth in our offense and our team. So we have some versatility to kind of, A, get through our bye, but B, also have another guy that we could throw in our lineup just in case.
Yeah, what's he gonna play? Fullback, running back, tight end. I mean, they're moving him all over the place. And even talking about he's gonna be like the main fullback. Like it's maybe even the goal line back. I mean, look, Kendra Miller's on IR now, and you're stuck there with Jamal Williams, who nobody believes can get past the line of scrimmage anymore. So, yeah, Taysom Hill is a name has gotten really interesting really fast. And before, Chase, you make your who's taking the pick here? Is that Chase? Yeah. Before Chase, you make your pick here between the two. I just want to throw this out there. Taysom Hill has jumped up to my tight end 17 because this is a guy who's a flyer that can no longer be ignored because he might actually have more consistent volume in a variety of ways that we hadn't seen on a consistent basis in the past, and from what we've been seeing. It's kind of a strange situation. Taysom Hill, you're the king of screwing up projections. I just want to put that out there, and you will always be.
As a dart thrower, as I mentioned with Mike Williams, I also do love Taysom Hill, and he is also my tight end 17 on the dot, funnily enough. But yeah, obviously the ride was pretty wild last year, but his averages are on par with a lot of the tight ends going much higher than him. Now, I'm getting 20 or I'm getting nothing, but candidly, I'd rather flip that coin than get 6.
I mean, that's the same thing you're getting out of tight ends 8 through 12 most years anyway. So.
Right. Now I have you both beat because I have Taysom Hill at tight end 16. And he feels like a guy that we always draft down around this range, or that we always think of as being a tight end, like a low end, give it a shot, tight end 2. And then he always ends up having these, he's a legitimate tight end 1. He is just about every year. Now, will they use him as much in that quarterback scat role? They've talked about using him more as a legitimate tight end and a fullback, more of an H-back kind of thing. But he's kind of always done this jack of all trades role. The only thing that I want to say about this whole thing before we get into who I'm picking is that we have already backed up our quarterback. We've already taken 2 quarterbacks, and I'm not necessarily a fan of taking 2 quarterbacks and 2 tight ends in the same draft. There are reasons to do it. There are builds where you can do it. I'm not a fan of doing it. We've already backed up our quarterback, and I think rightfully so because we took such a risky shot there. I'm not as worried about Pitts. If you're the kind of person who pays attention to bye weeks and that kind of thing, Pitts and Hill are going to share the same bye week, but you've got until week 12 to figure that out. So I'm not letting that necessarily factor into my decision. What I am letting factor into my decision is that, Mike Williams, when he's been healthy in his career, is a crazy weapon to have at your disposal. And if he's going to be the number 2 weapon for a Aaron Rodgers-led offense in that red zone, that could be fun and get fun in a hurry there. I'm going to go with Williams because they're both great choices. And at this point in the draft, they're both worthy dart throws. If we had maybe gone a little safer at quarterback and hadn't felt that need to back Daniels up so much, I may actually go with Taysom Hill here, but I am going to go with Mike Williams there and give us 7 wide receivers on this team because I think we've got 7 wide receivers. We've got an absolute avalanche of talent there at the wide receiver position, and I'm happy going into a year with that. I will take my chances that Pitts is at least a tight end 1, and by week 12 we'll figure out how to navigate his bye week. So Mike Williams is the choice here.
Okay, so before we get into the 15th round, I think it's a good time to make sure everybody remembers what our roster is now between parts 1 and 2. So just to recap: Justin Jefferson, Travis Etienne, Cooper Kupp, Devonta Smith, T. Higgins, Kyle Pitts, Tony Pollard, Christian Watson, Jaden Daniels, Chase Brown, J.K. Dobbins, Kirk Cousins, Joshua Palmer, and now Mike Williams. I like that team quite a bit, fellas. So now we get into rounds 15 and 16. Okay. And this is where, with most drafts, we are choosing between defenses and kickers. Nobody talks about defenses and kickers. So we're going to do it for this part of this show, except for I'm not quite ready to do that just yet. Now, Chris is going to be the nominee. And I'm just going to say this from the get. I'm not going to tell you who's Adam's nominee is going to be, but we're going to be choosing Adam's nominee. I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about this player, because he is still ADP-wise on the board at this point, and this is one of my top sleepers. Just wrote about him on the Fantasy Pros article that came out where we talk about the final round sleepers of running backs and wide receivers, and I want to talk about him on the show. And that is Jalen Tolbert, one of my top deep end round sleeper picks. Okay, now CeeDee Lamb just signed, so that's obviously great news. But the great news before that for the Cowboys at wide receiver was the emergence of Jalen Tolbert taking a stranglehold over that wide receiver 3 position. Now, I've always been a bigger Tolbert guy than most. I compared him to Michael Gallup, somebody I thought who could be a 1,000-yard receiver in his NFL career, has a good deep ball, plays really well as a perimeter threat wide receiver. Player Profiler, which I respect the hell out of, they comp him, his athletic and his college performances, to Adam Thielen. So what do they have in common? What they have in common is Adam Thielen and Michael Gallup are both wide receivers who broke out a little bit later on in their careers. Not right away, not in the first year, not in the second year, more towards the 3rd and 4th years when you saw these guys break out. So that's kind of in line with what I'm looking at with Jalen Tolbert. Now on the flip side of this, part of this discussion is that I think Brandon Cooks is cooked. There's real traction for that. First of all, he hasn't even gotten over 700 yards the last 2 years. 2022, he missed 4 games. That's partly due to why. But last year, he played 15. And he still couldn't get over 700 yards. And a lot of his metrics across the board just declined on an incredible level. I mean, we're talking about a guy who posted 1.3 yards per route run. It's only 66. 1.62 yards of target separation, ranked 53rd. His route run weight was 56. And his win rate versus man, which has become one of the stickiest stats for wide receivers in decline, was ranked 79th. I don't know if Brandon Cooks can get open consistently anymore. And it wasn't an issue of quality of targets. He was ranked 8th in quality of target. So he was seeing the targets in situations that he should have been able to make plays on the ball and wasn't able to do it. So if Brandon Cooks is cooked, and this offense is going to throw the ball potentially 600 times, came pretty close to it last year, and with the backfield shaping up the way that it is, wouldn't be shocked if that happened now. Somebody else besides CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson's going to catch the ball. I think that could be Jalen Tolbert, who's got a real shot to outperform his ADP. So I just want to take that time to talk about Tolbert Adam, you could talk about your nominee.
Yeah, and I agree. Tolbert is a pretty solid gamble at this point of the draft. That's going to be my word for the week, just if we weren't clear on that at this point. At any rate, though, my nomination here, just to get through it quickly, is the Kansas City Chiefs defense / special teams. This has been a very solid special teams unit for a long time. That is an underrated portion of it. But the big thing is listen, I trust in this GM, this staff, and namely Spags, that this is going to continue to be a very strong defensive unit. Even though I think there are legitimate question marks around the secondary specifically. I think this front seven is still very rock solid. Obviously, you still have Chris Jones. Obviously, you still have Korloftis. Some very solid linebacker help. Again, plenty to write home about in the front seven. But look, I think there's some underrated members of the secondary. I'm not all that concerned about Josh Williams, for instance. I think he's going to be a pretty solid corner for them. And on the whole, again, this is a team that has done a really good job, not paying guys and being able to replace them either outright or in the aggregate. And again, they're a consistently well-run team on both sides of the ball, and I'm willing to buy into that, especially and a lot of home leagues, other some of the top defenses are already getting drafted, and you get to go to 14, feel really solid, really safe about your pick. And again, when it comes to defense special teams, this feels like a very safe pick. And, if a team happens to pop off, this is one of those positions that, is always in the conversation as far as waivers go. So you can always change it out. But as far as picks you can make at this point, I think this is one of the best teams.
Okay, Chris, pick your nominee.
Well, I have to say I don't have a choice because we need defense, but they have a legal roster to be able to play. But I talked to Adam's points to Adam's defense on Kansas City. Many people were concerned about losing Snead, one of the guys they had in the corners, but they only had 8 interceptions last year. Yeah. So this defense could actually get more turnovers. A team that actually should improve their front seven, and then a team that offense should be better. So therefore, for other teams that actually score points, so therefore you might see the turnovers go up even more. So I like the upside for Kansas City's defense, where last year doesn't necessarily mean they can't get even better this year.
All right. And with that, we're now in the 16th round, our last round. Chris and I are going to have a kickoff. Let's do it, baby. Adam's going to choose between which kicker Chris and I have our kicker off about. Go ahead, Chris. You can go first.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Dustin Hopkins, a guy everybody seems to forget about. The guy that for Cleveland last year was 33 for 36. The guy who finished 2 for most people's PPR, 4 in some scoring formats, depending on how much you value the longer field goals. I'll just give you the idea of those longer field goals, 8 for 8, 50 yards plus. A guy who was 10 for 13, 40 yards, 50 yards. So a guy who has a big leg, a team that has a quick pace offense, even this Cleveland offense without multiple quarterbacks. It didn't matter if Watson was hurt, Scott Thompson was out there, whoever was out there. This team was able to move the ball, kick field goals. Dustin Hopkins is a guy that everybody seems to forget about, got paid this past offseason. Like I said, a guy who was one of the leading scorers you get an opportunity to get still here in the late rounds.
Okay. So he goes, Dustin Hopkins, definitely a big one. My guy's Jason Myers, another guy who I think gets kind of forgotten about a little bit. Like, people seem to not realize that he's been a top 6 kicker last 2 years in a row. And it was 1 year when the Seattle Seahawks were a top 10 scoring offense. And it was 1 year where the Seattle Seahawks were ranked 17th in scoring offense. So it didn't matter. And he's only being taken as the 12th kicker. So like the last starting kicker in most leagues at ADP 211. And he's sitting right there. I don't understand why we're watching him boom kicks from a million miles away in preseason. So obviously there's no decline as far as his power goes. So yeah, my nominee here is actually going to be Jason Myers. And once Adam makes his pick, this will be the most kicker talk we ever have on this show. I promise you. So Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just keep things quick. I like both guys, and I think that the upside is probably a touch higher with Hopkins, but I am going to go Jason Myers just in the sense that, look, I think that he benefited from not having Deshaun Watson. I will see the Deshaun Watson offense function when I see it. I'm not going to bet on it, and I think in part that helps him just in the sense that this, they had Chubb, they were able to get to the 50-45, but Watson couldn't get in the end zone, so you kick the field goal, and that's great. But right now, this offense is a bit more concerning because they're not going to be scoring running the ball or getting past the 50 running the ball. It's going to have to be through the air, which scares me because, again, I'm not sold on Watson just personally. That will be the crux of my issue, where I will go Myers, but only slightly because I do appreciate Dustin Hopkins.
All right. So let's recap this, baby. I must have lost my place after Joshua Palmer. So help me fill in the blank, guys. Justin Jefferson, Travis Etienne, Cooper Kupp, Devonta Smith, T. Higgins, Kyle Pitts, Tony Pollard is our RB2, Christian Watson, Jayden Daniels, Chase Brown, J.K. Dobbins, Kirk Cousins, Joshua Palmer. Then I believe we went Mike Williams.
Yep.
With the back-to-back wide receivers. Then it was Chiefs defense and Harrison Butker. Or Harrison Butker. Myers. I wanted to be here, but he's probably on there in most drafts in the 15th round if you are, in fact, drafting kicker. So, yeah, Jason Myers. Hell of a team, fellas. And, again, that was using our collective ranks and tiers as a group. So make sure you go ahead and check us out. Chase and I, in particular, we are up now on the Fantasy Sports Advice Network site. Our rankings are there for you to go ahead, check out. You can download them, take them with you to your drafts this weekend. Okay, be prepared. We have it all laid out for you. We have our rankings of all of our positions. I have my tiers set up for you to be able to follow along with the notes that I wrote up over the offseason. So go ahead, check that out. Download it absolutely free once you become a member on Fantasy Sports Advice Network. So make sure you guys go ahead and do that. Next week, I don't know if you know this. Next week, week one. Next week is week one. So we're doing a week one preview. And we're going to get into, the stuff we've been preparing for on this whole offseason, where we're going to hit you with multiple different topics, each one of us holding up a segment, and we're going to make sure we're giving you every single angle that operate and dominate. That's going to be the whole point of this. So make sure you check us out on your favorite podcast app. Make sure you're tuning in live at 9:30 on our YouTube channel at FF Advice Network. And fellas, anything else you want to add?
Get her done.
All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Hey there, I want to thank you for watching Operation Domination today. And if you're enjoying the show, there are some ways you can help support us. You can go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination and leave us a 5-star review. And you can do this on any podcast platform or on our YouTube page when you go to @FF Advice Network. This completely helps out the show be able to grow, and also leave us comments to let us know how we can curtail the show to you, because you are the most important member of the show. So again, go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination to leave a 5-star review and leave a comment wherever you listen or watch the show, and we'll help better serve you. It doesn't seem to want to actually end.